Hey guys, this is Himanshu from Code Campaign, and we are continuing with our linked list module. So, in the last lecture, I gave you the overview about the linked list and why we need linked list as a data structure because we already have array. So, why do we even need linked list as a data structure? So, if you haven't watched that video, I will highly recommend you first watch that video, the overview of the linked list, and then come back to this video. Okay, so today what we are going to discuss about, we are going to discuss about the basics of the linked list, how we are going to um implement the basic operation like insertion and the deletion in the linked list, how we are going to print the nodes in the linked list. So very basic operations that we perform over linked list, we are going to see how we are going to implement it. Okay, so let me just quickly change the pointer. Okay, so first we'll start with the node. So how the node structure of the linked list looks like. So in linked list we have node, and in that node we will be storing data, and then we'll have one link which will point to the other node, right? So we'll have data and then we'll have link which will point to the other node. So if you want to present it in a it as an object, like how will you go ahead and present it as a code? So where is this? So what you have to have one data, whatever type of data you want to store. So suppose we are storing integer, so we'll say integer data, and then what you will have link reference for the node, right? So node, and we'll say it next because we are pointing to the next node. So that's how our class object will look like for the linked list. Okay, so yeah, so that's how the our node object will look like. Now let's understand the basic operation, which is insertion. How does it work? So initially your linked list empty, you don't have anything. So then what you will do, you will create first node. So this is our first node of the linked list, and we are storing integer. So we'll say our integer data is suppose 1. We are storing 1 here, and then we'll have our next, which will be null because we have only one node, right? Now suppose and we will have one more reference, which I will say as head, right? Okay, now suppose I want to add one more node at the end of the list, right? So right now we have only one element, so I want to add one more node whose data is 2, right? And I want to add this node in at the last of the list, right? So if it is at the last, so its next pointer will be null because it will not be pointing to anything. So what we have to do, we have to change this pointer or reference, and we have to point this reference to this node, right? Right. So if so that this is what we have to do. Now suppose we want to insert one more node, but we want to insert in between this, right? So our node is this. Suppose we want to insert 3 in between both of these nodes, right? So what next will be for this? This guy has to point to this node, and what we have to do? We have to change this link, and then we have to point this link to here, right? So this is the basic insertion operation in linked list. We'll see how we are going to implement it into the code, but this is how it looks. Um, so that's how we are adding the nodes. We are changing the links, and then we are just adding the nodes. Okay. Now suppose I want to add something at the front. So suppose I want to add something at the front of the list. This has 0. So what I have to do, I have to change the head to point to this guy, right? And this guy will point to this node, right? So linked list will always have one head reference, which will tell us from where our linked list is starting, right? So this is our head. Cool. So this is the basic insertion. Uh, Now discuss about the deletion part. So suppose I want to delete some node. Suppose I want to remove the last node. So if I want to remove the last node, what I have to do, I have to make this as null, right? So if this is null, that means we are not pointing to this node, right? So our list is this much then, right? So our list will end here. Now suppose I want to delete this node. Now if I want to delete this node, what I have to do, I have to just change this link to point to here, right? So when I traverse from head now, my next thing is pointing here, so I will reach here rather than going to this, right? So this node, this link is removed, right? Even though this node will be pointing to this thing, but we don't have any reference, right? So we don't have any reference to it because our head was anyway pointing to this node, and now this node is pointing to this node, so this node is actually lost, right? So indirectly we can say we actually our list is only of two node now, right? So this is how deletion works in linked list. So now let's jump to the coding part and see how we are going to implement these two operations in code. So this is our ID. Let's create a new project because we are starting with new module. So let's create a new project, name it as linked list. Cool. So this is our new project. It's ready. Now let's create our node for the linked list. So let's add one class. Mm, Let's name it as node. Okay, so as we discussed, so let's consider our class as integer, and then it will have a next reference to the next node, right? So let me make this public so we can modify them. Okay, and then let's create one constructor as well so that we can initialize our node while we create them. Cool. So our node is ready. Now let's create again one util. So let's say it's linked list core util. So this will have core operations like insertion, delete, print, traverse, right? So okay, cool. So now let's go ahead and create our first function for linked list. So suppose we want to insert uh, so suppose we want to insert node at the start of the list. So we want to insert node here, and this is where our head is, right? So let's write the code for this. So public static insert node at start. So let's get the data for the node and also the head of the linked list, right? We want head because so so if we don't know head, so as I already told you, right? So we will only get the like in binary tree, we were only getting the root, right? Root node. So same is the case with linked list. We only get the head node. So head is basically a reference which is pointing to the first node, the starting node of the linked list. So this is what we get. Cool. So let's go back here. So again, we'll check if our list is empty. That means head is pointing to the null. If it is the case, then what we have to do, we have to just create a new node because the list is empty, right? So we have to just create the new node and then just return it, right? If this is not the case, what we have to do, then we have to insert it in the front, right? So then what we'll do, we'll first create our node that we want to insert. So let's create the node. This will be null, right? Because this node accepts two parameter. One is the data and the other is the reference. So initially when we are creating the node, we don't know what will be the reference. So we are setting it as null. Cool. So now what we'll do, let's understand here again. So what we did uh, up till now, we created one node in which we inserted the data and then we set next as null. Now what we have to do, the, now what we have to do, we got the head, right? So we got this head, which is the reference to the start of the list, right? So now what we have to do, we have to, so if we want this node to be the first node into the list, what we have to do, our head should be pointing to this node rather than this node, right? So if our head would point here, then our list will start here. And the other thing what we have to do, we have to point the next link to this node, right? So these are the two things that we have to do, right? So first we have to point the link to this node, the starting node, and then we have to move our head from here to here, and then our list will start from here. So we inserted a low node at the beginning. Okay. So now let's go ahead and do these two operations. So first, this node should point to the start node, and start node is being pointed by head, right? So if we point this node next to head, that means we started pointing this node to the start of the list, right? So initially our head is here, right? So what we are doing here, we are saying the next of this list should point to the where the head node is pointing. So head node is pointing here, so this will start pointing here. And then the second thing what we have to do, we have to say head node should point now to this node, right? So let's go back and say this. Then head node will point to the node that we all created, right? And then what we have to do, we have to just return head, modified head, right? Because we modified the head. Right, so this is our first insert node at start. Now let's go and check if this thing works. So first we have to create our list. So let's create some linked list. So suppose we have one, and then we'll say head ka next. Head next will point to this some other node, suppose this 2, and then we'll say head next, and next will point to 3, right? So suppose our list initially have only 3 nodes. So what we did here, we created a list. How we created a list? Let me go back to one. Yeah, this slide. So first we said we created one node. We said the data is 1 and this thing is null. And we said head is pointing here. right? Let me go back to again the ID. So this first line, right? This first line, this is what it is saying. Now in the second line we said head next should point to the other node, right? So let's go back here. We are saying head next. What is head next? Head is pointing to this node, and this node next is this pointer, right? So this is the object. So this will have next, which is right now is null, and data, which is one, right? So we are saying head next. Now point head next to the new node that we are creating, and the new node data value is 2, and this value is null. So we are saying point next to this guy, right? So this is what we are saying here in the second line, right? So that thing is done. Then after that, what we are saying, head next should point to new node whose value is 3, and the next pointer is null, right? So head next is this guy, and head next dot next is, so head next is this, and this guy next is this one, right? And this one is initially null. But what we want to do, we want it to point to the new node that we created, right? With the 3 value and the link as null. So now we are saying this guy should point to this guy. So this is our list created, which has three nodes, value 1, 2, and 3. Now, so far so good. So let's write one print function also, so that we'll be able to see if our what is the state of our list, right? So we want to see it on the console by printing, right? So let's write one. So let's say this function name is print linked list. Again, we'll get the head, right? Now what do we want to do? Let's take one variable or one reference, initialize it with the head, and then what we want to say, we will say something like this: not equal to null. So what we have to do here, suppose we want to print all these values, like we want to print all the elements which are there in the list, right? So we'll start from here. So we initialized our crawler to head. So now we are pointing to this node. What we have to do, first we have to print the value. So it will be like crawler dot data will print this value. Then after that, what we have to do, we have to move to this, right? So what we have to do, we have to say crawler equal to crawler dot next, right? This is what we have to do. So now initially the guy was pointing here, the crawler was pointing here, but we are saying crawler equal to blah, blah, crawler equal to crawler dot next. So we are saying the crawler next is this node, right? The crawler next is pointing to this node. So we are saying change crawler to crawler dot next. So crawl crawl oh god. So crawler will start pointing here, right? And then again, if we say crawler equal to crawler dot next, then crawler will start pointing here, right? Okay. So now and then we'll just print the values. So let's write the code here. So what we have to do, first print the value of that particular node. So let's print the value. Okay, so printed the value. Now we have to move our crawler. So crawler equal to crawler dot next, right? And until our crawler becomes null, we'll keep on moving in the loop, right? So whenever crawler will become null, when we'll reach at this, and we'll say crawler dot next, and our crawler dot next at this node is null. So that means we reach the end of the list. So we cannot move further. So we'll stop our while loop. Until then, we'll keep on printing the value of the nodes, right? So this is how it is. So now let's go back and call this function and see if it is working. So linked list core util print pass head here. Okay, now let's change it to linked list. Now let's check whatever list we created. Oh, so we have to stop the program also, otherwise we will not be able to see. So let's stop our program here. Otherwise the console will do just comes up and it goes away. So we'll not be able to see the output. Okay, so 1, 2, and 3. This is what we expected, right? 1, 2, and 3. So that means our linked list is fine and value is being printed. Now what we have to do, what we want to do, we want to insert the node at the front. Cool. So first let me stop debugging. So let's call again. Say insert this node at the start. Suppose we want to add 0 at the start and then pass our head. Okay. And after this, just to check if we have added it, we have added 0 at the start or not, what we'll do, we'll again print. Cool. So let's check if this runs. So we are unable to add 0 at the start. So that means we did something wrong here. I would recommend you guys pause the video here and just try to debug on your own what is the mistake that we did. Okay, so let's start. So the problem is, let's go inside the insert node function. The problem is this function ran, we changed the pointer references and everything, and we changed the head also, right? But we never we never changed the value of our head here, right? So what we have to do, I intentionally did this mistake to show you guys what is happening. So what we have to do, we have to change the value of the head because our head changed, not here, sorry, here. So our head changed, right? So we have to change the value of our head. So now we are catching the value of our head, whatever the change value was, right? And then if we pass here, now it should print the right output. So let's check if it works. Cool. So now we are printing from 0. So that's fine. That means our code is working. Now let's write one more function which will insert the value at the end of the list, right? So we added at the start of the list, now add at the end of the list. Insert at end of list. Okay, so we'll accept whatever node we want to add and we'll head, right? Cool. So first thing first, what we'll do, we'll first check if our head is null. If our head is null, that means we don't have any node, so we'll just create one node and return. Right, so this will be our first node or last node, whatever this is. So we'll just add this and return. Sorry, have to do new here. Cool, so this is done. Now, what we'll do now, we will, we have, so we returned it. Now we have to add the node at the end of the list, right? So what we have to do, first we have to reach to the end of the list, right? So again we'll do the same thing, but whatever we did, let me just, whatever we did here, right? So here we traverse the whole list. So again we'll take our crawler and will point the scroller. Initially it will point to the head, and then let's see what we have to do here, right? So let's go back to our presentation. Okay, so so let me clear some of the things here so it will be easy. Let's clear all this. Okay, so let me write it properly. This is pointing here, and come on, man. This is pointing here, and the value was 1, right? And this is our next node. Okay, and our head is here. So what we did, we said crawler will also point here. So suppose C is our crawler. Now what we have to do, we have to reach here, and then we have to add one node here, right? So what will be the condition to stop our while loop here? The condition is when our crawler dot next equal to null, right? So when our crawler next is equal to null, then we will stop, right? Because this is the only node which the end node will always have next as null, right? This is what we are doing. So until our crawler next is not equal to null, our while loop should run, right? We should in keep on going forward. So initially here our crawler next is not null, so we'll say crawler equal to crawler next. So our crawler will come here. Then here also crawler next is not null, we'll say crawler equal to crawler next, so our crawler will come here. But at this moment our crawler next is null, so our while loop will end and our crawler will point here. After this what we'll say? We'll say crawler next equal to whatever new node we wanted to point it to. So we'll say new node, and then we'll give it the value, whatever value we have. Suppose we want to add some 100 and then null, right? So it will be pointing to the new node. Cool. So now let's go back and write it into our code. So now we know what we have to do. Crawler dot next is not equal to null. We have to run. After this, so we'll just keep on incrementing our crawler here. So when we'll come out of this loop, we'll have our crawler will be pointing to the last node. So now what we have to do, we have to just say crawler next should point to the new node, whatever we want to create, right? And then just return our head. Here we didn't change our head, so we don't even need to return the head, but just because we are expecting a return value, so we are returning the head here. Cool. So now let's run this program. So let's start where we left. I'm adding new lines so that we get all the outputs at the new lines, so it will be easy for us to. So now in this case I'm not, we haven't modified the head, so I'll not be catching into the, so I'll not be modifying the value of the head. So you will see like what will happen. So what, suppose we want to add 100 at the end end of the list, right? And then what we want to do, we just want to print our modified list, right? Cool. So now let's go ahead and run this program and see what is the output. Okay, so yeah, now 100 is added at the end, right? So I think we should conclude this video here because the video is becoming very long. I will write the code of the deletion in the next video. So if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please go ahead and subscribe. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up because it helps my channel to show up in the YouTube search further. If you are liking the video, the videos will be shown in the YouTube recommendations. So I'll get a little bit more traffic. So if you really like the video, just like it. If you have any question and if you like the video. If you want to send me some appreciation, just put it on the comment. If you want to have a discussion, if you could not understand anything, just put it into the comment box. So see you in the next video. Thank you.